all about the 403B. Let's break it down on this episode of the Hawaii Retirement Show. All right, welcome everyone. Thanks for tuning in wherever you may be listening from across the Aloha State. We're excited to have another episode here of the Hawaii Retirement Show. Going to break down the 403Bs for all of our state workers. We'll be especially interested in this episode. Paul, how's it going?
It's going good. It's going good. Excited for the topic.
Awesome. Yeah, so let's just I guess we'll just jump right into it here. 403Bs, really great tool, really great piece of the retirement puzzle. I know we mentioned it multiple times on these episodes, the three-legged stool of the retirement puzzle, so to speak. But yeah, how about Paul, you just kick us off and tell us a little bit about the 403B.
Yeah, awesome. So, the cool thing about the 403B is this program is, it's a great place to start saving for retirement. So historically, with regards to 403B in general, it's always been a program that's for nonprofit, maybe hospitals, schools, and churches in a lot of respects. So the cool thing about 403B is you have to be one of those types of organizations to sponsor a retirement plan like this versus like a 401k, like that's, for profit, or anybody can really sponsor a 401k. So that's one of the cool differences, but maybe specifically for like Department of Education or like the Hawaii's landscape for 403B, it was always called people might know like the TSA or like the tax sheltered annuity. And the reason why it was primarily called that was because that annuities were the only providers that were on the platform. So it kind of got that name, and kind of continued to go as, years went by. And I don't remember exactly when it happened, but the 403B was added to allow for what's called a 403B7. And basically, the biggest difference is mutual fund companies were allowed to become providers on the plan, which was a great opening to allow for, maybe lower cost investment options and just alternatives to what was readily available, for educators. But, one thing that I'll tee off right at the top, so if you are a state of Hawaii employee, the 403B is kind of for only a few types of positions or a few types of employers within the state. So like, city and county and things like that, you have access to the 457, whereas, Department of Education, University of Hawaii, those are the primary groups, because it's a school setting where they have access to, actually, they have access to both the 457 and the 403B. But anyway, just thinking about so today we'll talk about that 403B.
Yeah, and I always thought that was interesting because I always hear it referenced, as the tax sheltered annuity, right? And I wonder when it was that mutual funds came into the picture, because as long as I've been doing this, I've always known it as, more of a 401k than an annuity. I mean, there's obviously I like to simple it down to like it's the 401k for the public sector, and there's some similarities, and there's a few differences as well, but so let's get into the national benefit services. So both of these, so there's two different national benefit services websites, correct, for how these state employees, and I think those are broken down into the DOE, right, and then the university system has their own.
Yep.
So you want to give us a little rundown about that?
Yeah, totally. So NBS, or National Benefit Services, they are going to be the third-party administrator for the entire plan for the 403B within the Department of Education and the University of Hawaii systems. So they're kind of, in a sense, they're like kind of like that gatekeeper to, how funds are moved, maybe from your paycheck, what provider you might use. And yeah, so just like Jason said, there are two different websites. So if you are like a Department of Education employee, you would have a separate website for the DOE, your K through 12, if you will. And then if you work for the University of Hawaii, you're going to have a University of Hawaii website portal that you can log into. And maybe we'll actually add that into our show notes because they're kind of
Yeah.
long URLs to spell out here. But basically, those are great resources to just look to see what's available. Because one of the biggest differences, and I'll kind of just keep rolling here, between the 457 and the 403B is investment providers. So just to kind of give you a compare and contrast, the 457 has like a single provider, right? Like Island Savings has Empower, and City and County of Honolulu has Voya. So they only have one option for those employer groups. Within the 403B, they actually have, and dozens actually, like it's quite a few, and a lot of those providers are advisor driven. So maybe like a financial advisor works for a company or works for these firms that go out and serve the educator market. So that's a big part of it. And the other thing that's different is the 403B within the University of Hawaii system and the 403B within the DOE system have a lot of the same providers, but they do have different providers, right? So even there is a lot different.
Yeah, slightly different investment provider offerings, right? Custodians and whatnot. And then from the NBS website, those links, and we'll definitely put those in the show notes. That's where people who have access to this 403B can get what they call the salary reduction agreement, right?
Correct.
And that's
Yeah.
kind of the main form that you'll use to kind of kick off contributions. And I think it's the same form they use if you want to adjust, right? Like if you're changing the amount, you use that same one. And that's all access from those NBS websites for sure.
Yeah. So again, those NBS websites have a lot of great information. So I worked for a firm for like a little over 3 years that their primary demographic was educators, was, K through 12. And we would walk campuses. We would basically pop our head into teachers' doors. And, it was always a little awkward, to be honest, because, kind of like cold calling, if you will, and just, teachers are busy, people are, at work. And it's like, what is this guy coming in here for? But that was one of the best ways for us to get in front of, teachers. And,
Right.
for us now, looking back, I would start with that NBS website. If I was, a teacher today, I would push them to that because, there are, like I said, dozens of providers within that provider list. There are, advisors you can work with, so you might have a family friend or something like that, or you might want to work with a specific type of provider that's maybe a lower cost investment option that you didn't know was available, right? Because, you only know what you know. So yeah, start with that MBS provider website. The salary reduction agreement is definitely how you start contributing to those types of plans. And at the end of the day, use it as a resource to just keep yourself educated.
Sure. All good stuff there.
Yeah.
So let's move on to like why it's important for somebody to take advantage of the 403B. And again, we're going back to the three-legged stool. We kind of always seem to go back to this three-legged stool, but whether you're a federal, city and county, or state worker, right? We always talk about your pension being one leg, and then Social Security being the second leg. And the third leg is this kind of this supplemental, whatever that might be, right? For the federal workers, it's the TSP. For some people, it's just it's an IRA account. For what we're referencing, the state workers, it could be the 403B or the 457 or both. But there is an importance to kind of map out, is my Social Security and my pension enough for my lifestyle in the future, or for whatever my goals might be, right? And if it is, that's great. I would assume most times it's not.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you're going to have to kind of start using these other resources and retirement vehicles to kind of squirrel away some money and create a nice little nest egg to kind of supplement those two. Anything you want to add on to that?
No, I mean, absolutely. It's just, again, it's another simplified way to save money towards retirement. I mean, a nice thing about it is, you can do payroll deductions, right? So, I mean, it's systematically done. It's just like it will happen. There are pretty high thresholds, right? Which we'll get into, versus an IRA. But yeah, it's a supplement to your other things, your pension, Social Security, and maybe even, if you're married and you have a spouse, supplemental to those types of things too.
Sure, sure. And since you mentioned it, let's roll right into it. So, like you said, the IRA limits are actually somewhat small. I guess it's only about,
6,500 or something like that. Yeah.
right. So it's less than half of what you can contribute by kind of a wide margin to these 401ks, 403bs, TSPs and whatnot. So you want to tell us a little bit about the contribution limits?
Yeah, I mean, so just like 401k and stuff like that. So the maximum, in 2023, just to kind of put a timestamp, is 22,500 that you can put into these plans. And I know we've referenced that a few times in our different episodes, but just knowing that you can put a pretty sizable amount into these accounts. And again, if you happen to be 50 years or older, there is a catch-up provision which allows you to save an extra 7,500. So it's a total of 30,000 that you can basically save into the 403b program. But as Jason mentioned, for these Department of Education, University of Hawaii employees, having access to the 403b and the 457 actually allows you to save equally in both, right? They're not tied together. So you could effectively save, over $40,000, 22.5 into the 457 and 22.5 into the 403b if you have the ability to or wanted to, right? So the cool thing about these programs is they are both through your employer, through your payroll, but they're not connected in the amounts that you can save.
Right. And we talked about 401ks in the past, and one really enticing thing, and even on our TSP episodes, one really enticing thing that kind of nudges people to participate is the matching
Yeah.
contributions, right? And the matching contributions, everybody knows, our listeners know, I mean, that's free money, that's money that can be left on the table if you're not participating. Now with the 403bs offered through these two state, the DOE and university, there's no matching contribution. So that's just something to be aware of. That's not a reason to turn away from it, but
Yeah.
there's just no matching there.
Yeah, no, and like to me, like what I always say, whether people, agree with me or not, is, maybe you don't have like a traditional like match to these plans, but you do have, the pension, they are matching funds into the pension. So again, there's an additional way to save for your inevitable future retirement. And traditionally, the three-legged stool has great, fixed incomes with Social Security and pension. But again, this third leg is like a really integral part of making sure you have enough, right?
Right. And you're more on the pulse of this stuff because you've got a lot of previous experience with the 403b, more so than I do. But recently they just updated to offer Roth
Yeah.
contributions, right? So you can now take advantage of that.
Yeah, no, and that was a huge upgrade. They've been talking about that for years actually.
Hmm.
And yeah, the DOE, they made that change. They changed those rules within the plan document and now allow
Was
people to.
that was that last year? Sorry.
I believe it was late last year. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I had a client reach out saying, "Hey, I got this notice." I'm like, "Awesome. Let's talk
Hmm.
about it." And basically what you're able to do now is you're able to save, into your 403b as a Roth contribution. So that's after tax contribution, tax deferred, and pulling it out tax free. Right. So one thing that I want to point out here is you have access to this, but it will depend on the provider that you choose if that provider has access to it. So not every provider within the system has access to Roth. A lot of them do, but again, going back to that MBS website, you can find out because there's notes on each one that say, has access to Roth. But yeah, I mean, totally a really great benefit. And the one thing
Yeah.
here, just to mention about Roth is, the Roth contribution doesn't tie into an income, like, so if you and your spouse or something like that have really high income, you're not excluded from being able to save into that Roth provision in the 403b.
Right. No, yeah, that's a great point. Really valuable there, and it just takes time for some of these custodians to catch up. So I would imagine you'll see more and more of them be able to accommodate the Roth in the years coming. At least I would think so. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think a part of it is some of those providers that don't allow it might be like an annuity contract. So maybe
Oh, sure, right.
there are some differences that maybe they'll never build that
Gotcha.
into it. But you mean maybe, I don't know.
Right,
Um,
right, right.
and again, what I would also say is just because you might have experience with only one provider somewhere else, you actually, I don't know why you would do this, but you actually could have more than one provider making more than one like salary reduction agreement to, like two different
Right, right.
custodians. I mean, theoretically, you could do that.
Sure, sure. Yeah, no, I was just thinking with the Secure 2.0, they made it where the employer can now, their matching contributions for some of these 401ks can be Roth.
Yeah.
But we're seeing, it's an administrative, mountain to climb for some of these custodians. So
Yep.
even, despite the fact that they can, it's still going to take some time for them to get up to speed.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, so let's see here. We're doing good. Moving on. So let's talk about the withdrawal or distributions from the 403b. Anything you want to highlight there?
Yeah, I mean, I think with a lot of the conversations we had so far, there are the ability to take just standard infrequent withdrawals, if you will. You can take it, as long as you're, at retirement age, you can take it out penalty free. With a lot of these, it might depend on the provider you choose as well, right? So since there are several annuity providers, you can theoretically set it up to annuitize, basically converting it to a fixed type of income stream.
Right.
And you can set up all kinds of different ways to withdraw these funds.
Mhm.
But again, by and large, for the most part, as we talked about, like about with 401k and even the annuity podcast, you'll have several different options.
Gotcha, gotcha. And then so just like all these other like the 457, I mean there is some important things to note when we're talking about rollovers, right, between accounts like we mentioned on the 457. That kind of works best going one way, which is the 457 into an IRA, not an IRA into a 457 because of the a couple of the distribution rules, right? So anything you want to highlight with the 403bs and the rollovers?
Yeah, I mean, for me, like I would probably say it's a little bit more flexible than the 457. Money coming in, money going out. There's a lot more flexibility. There's not there's less, I guess, negatives on that respects. The
Right.
biggest thing is going to be knowing that since you have multiple providers within the plan, so while you're employed with the DOE or with the university, if you choose to change providers, you can do what's called like a in plan. It's not really a rollover. It's more like a direct transfer in plan. So you're still employed, you're still working. Maybe you started with one company and you want to move to a different company. That's totally allowable. So it's not really a rollover, but you're
Gotcha.
able to do that. If you happen to come from a previous job and you want to roll money into the 403b, you could do that. But again, you have to be to roll money out, like all these other plans we talked about. There is a termination. There is a like stopping of employment that's required to move money out of the plan. But in a sense, I would say it's a little bit more flexible than the 457.
Gotcha. And then kind of getting to the end here. So, hopefully our listeners have listened to previous episodes, but a lot of these same retirement vehicle rules apply.
Yeah.
So RMDs, right? Required minimum distribution. Once you get to a certain age, you got the IRS, the government wants you to start taking distributions so that there's taxes coming out, right? So that applies.
Yep.
Beneficiary designations, right? Just like the other accounts. Really important thing to do, really important thing to follow up and check up on
Yep.
every so many years or anytime there's a big change, right? Vesting. So there is no vesting, right? Because, well, but what I mean by there is no vesting, you're 100% vested because there is no matching contributions.
That's correct.
Vesting is your money is always your money. It's when is the employer's money now you're considered your money. So since there is
Exactly.
no employer match, we're vested there.
Yep.
Um, what about loans from the 403b?
Yeah. So here's a big difference too between the 457, right? Because within the 403b program, loans are permitted.
Hmm.
Um, They're not always encouraged, but
Sure, sure,
but they
sure.
are permitted, right? So no, for this one, if you did have a balance, you can take, maybe we might have to find out the full rules, but you can take, since it's 100% vested, you can take up to 50% of your account balance. I think it's up into like a $50,000 limit.
Yes, right, right,
So
right,
the max you could take out theoretically is 50,000, as long as your balance is 100,000 plus, right? Um,
right.
so anyway, with regards to loans, they are permitted in the 403b. And, in my just experience, you do see a lot of this, just because of, income, expenses and things like that. This is kind of the first place to raid in a lot of cases for teachers, which is not necessarily something we recommend, but it is available. Most providers have a pretty simple process to be able to just access that.
Yeah, and then circling back, one thing I wanted to touch on was just the plan and investment fees. Now, from my experience, they're pretty nominal. It's nothing, crazy, but I know it's like a flat administrative fee, correct?
Yeah.
And then there's the custodian always has their own, expense ratios and investment fees for whatever they're providing.
No, absolutely. So NBS, again, we've talked about them, National Benefit Services. They have a per participant type of fee level across all plan. So,
Right.
I believe that's about $3 a month. It's a part of, like, if you're contributing to these plans, it's kind of just like a service fee, if you will. And then again, I mean, I'm just scrolling through here on my iPad on the website for DOE. There's dozens of providers, and each one of those providers will have different fees.
Right. I know. Sorry, I know at one point, like for Vanguard, I remember there was like an additional administrative fee, and it was something small also, but like on top of it, there was like a $5 a month or something to use certain providers. So I guess the moral of the story is it kind of varies, but it's not significant, right?
Yep.
And the investment fees are kind of what you expect from all the custodians.
Yeah, I mean, and not all University of Hawaii and DOE participants have the same provider list, right? So there
Right,
are
right,
different
right.
providers, so for example, I know, your wife has experience with the university system, being a
Sure.
university employee, so they do have access to Vanguard, whereas DOE sadly does not, right? So there are
Right, right.
some differences. And again, I would say, like, since there are annuity providers, those can be a little bit different as an expense than maybe some of the mutual fund providers, but not always the case, right? Um, so
And then I think it's good for, do a little for our listeners, do a little research. There's a long list there. Kind of think about your goals and what you're looking for. And there's so much similarities between a lot of these providers. And it'd be really hard to say one is superior to the other. They're all great in what they offer. They all can be used for the certain things, right? So it's good just to kind of do your homework, understand what they offer and how that fits into your kind of goals and your plans.
absolutely. And the only thing that I would add too is, for these 403b University Hawaii 403b systems, the provider you choose also might require an advisor or might not, right? So your
Right, right.
advisor is going to incorporate cost as well. Now, I'm not
Sure.
discrediting, the advisor. I do have DOE clients myself, but
Right.
though that's definitely a part of the conversation. Like, if you want to work with somebody, they might have access to a limited amount of providers versus some of these advisors might have access to one provider only, because that's who they
Right.
work for.
Okay, so let's close it off here with the 403bs. Let's talk about, so you can use the 403b money that you've set aside throughout the years, and you can actually use that to purchase service credits,
Yeah.
correct? So that can count towards your years of service for the pension, right?
Yeah. Yep. So just like we talked about with the 457, the TSP, and the other types of programs out there for our listeners, this is one and the same. You can use these dollars to buy back service credits. As Jason was just saying, the most important thing is they got to do that before retirement. Like, they got to make that clear. But yeah, you were able to do that.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I guess that comes down to a decision of, how much do you value that, the incremental increase in lifetime secure income of the pension versus the, whatever you might have it in, as far as the other investments. So that's a choice each individual has to make, and comes down to their unique circumstances.
Right, exactly. And keeping finances individualized, personalized for you and your family, not everybody's gonna have the same exact answer.
Absolutely. Anything you want to close us out with before we kind of head out here on our 403B episode?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, just know that you have access to a lot of resources, and do your homework, understand that there are lots of providers. But in my opinion, not every provider is created equal.
Sounds good.
Awesome.
The opinions and statements presented on this show are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations. Never make any investment or financial decisions based on information offered on this show without first consulting your financial, legal, or tax advisor. All economic and performance information mentioned on the show is historical in nature and is not indicative of any future results. All indices mentioned on this show are unmanaged and cannot be invested in directly. All information is believed to be from reliable sources. However, we make no representation as to its completeness or accuracy. Lastly, all opinions expressed by Jason Cutitta, Paul McWilliams, and any guests on the show are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinions of or are endorsed by ToBA Financial or Inspire Advisors. For Jason Cutitta, investment advisory services are offered through ToBA Financial LLC, a registered investment advisor offering advisory services in the state of Hawaii and in other jurisdictions where exempt from registration. And for Paul McWilliams, investment advisory services are offered through Inspire Advisors LLC, a registered investment advisor with the SEC.